nothing's really magical yet in terms of it can do everything.
Right.
I haven't gotten to use a lot of haven't gotten to rely a lot on like the GitHub PR agent type examples, like whether it's GitHub Copilot or even the Cursor one. I find those a bit more noisy.
Yep.
And you don't get to carry the context of what you're doing to them. So if you open a PR and let Copilot or Claude's agent try to comment on the PR or review it, it just ends up being noisy. I end up ignoring it.
Ahmad Nassri is the CTO at Socket, the #1 software supply chain security platform. He's also a startup advisor and angel investor. Leading up to the acquisition by GitHub in 2020, Ahmed served as the CTO for NPM, taking over the critical mission of ensuring the open source JavaScript registry remains stable, reliable, and sustainable for the millions of developers that rely on it daily. Prior to joining NPM, Ahmed led the platform engineering team as chief architect for TELUS Digital. And before that, as VP of engineering at Kong, his focus was on powering API-driven development and open source technology. Ahmed also founded Refactor Community, previously known as TechMasters, a developer community of over 17,000 plus members, operating 4 annual tech conferences in Canada. Also, Ahmed is our guest today on the AI Shift podcast. Thanks, Ahmed, for joining us. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's start with like what you're doing these days, and then maybe sort of get into like a short bio, how you got into tech and that kind of thing. So where are you? Is Socket, right?
That's right.
That's cool. Tell me more.
So Socket is the open source supply chain service provider that looks at everything that's happening in the open source space, typically known as the SCA kind of products. SCA stands for software composition analysis, for those who don't know. Essentially what we do, we look at every version of every package that's ever published to anything in open ecosystems, NPM, for example, PyPy, Go, Ruby, Gems, all the other kind of ecosystems out there that you're familiar with.
Yep.
We look for everything from malwares to typo squatting to vulnerabilities and malicious behavior in those packages, so that for software teams who are building using these open source tools, they are safe and protected. We've seen a lot of interesting things happen in the past, I would say 6 to 7 weeks. Some of the first time evers,
right,
if you will.
Yeah.
And the threat factors keep getting more and more interesting, but that also means more and more scary, which is way more essential now that every team needs to have some sort of SCA scanning and SCA protection in place, and that's what Socket provides.
Yeah, I've had a couple of teams that I'm serving recently, like, oh, by the way, some worm put all of our code on the internet. I'm like, wait, what? and thank God we didn't have like passwords in the code, but like if we had, like, oh my gosh, and even then, like we still have to sort of like scrub laptops and reboot and start over. So this is a big problem you guys are tackling. Yeah, that's
right. And traditionally, like the type of tooling and the type of products, what we call legacy SCA providers, it's kind of like reactive, not proactive.
Right.
So typically you would just scan your dependencies and manifest files and see what's in there, and then find out that you've been vulnerable or potentially vulnerable.
Yep.
But what we're focusing on is prevention. So the differentiation about Socket than any other kind of like SCA tooling, we kind of position ourselves as like a 0-day protection. So we are proactively looking at what's happening out there and providing you and your teams the kind of alerting and protections. We just launched, for example, our firewall product that prevents you from even downloading something to your machine. Because, again, for the most part, historically, SCA tooling waits for something to be committed to a pull request or a GitHub pipeline or any other tool before you're actually warned. And that's a little bit too late, especially with all these attack vectors now. They're targeting developer machines and trying to steal credentials.
It was running on part of the NPM scripts, and so thereby, before it ever gets to the repo.
That's right.
Yeah.
So for us, we want to prevent it from even touching a developer machine or a CI pipeline or anything else like that.
Got it.
So that you don't even have to worry about cleaning it up after and then doing the whole resets, as you mentioned.
Cool. So I'm imagining some sort of proxy or something so that okay. Nice. Let's rewind a little bit and cover so that's what you're doing these days, right?
That's right.
But let's rewind a little bit, how your bio, like I read off your bio just now, like Kong and holy cow, right? NPM, these are some really big names. Socket seems really cool, and you and I worked together at TELUS. That was also a pretty big deal. Our listeners may not know that, but we do. But yeah, think about the journey that got you here. How did you get started in all this?
Yeah, so for me, I've always been fascinated with developer productivity and improving both kind of the developer workflow, both from a selfish aspect of I wanted to be able to do better. I want to be able to do good work for myself and the product and the software I'm producing, but also level up the team around me and make their workflow better and easier and so on. So throughout my career, I've had the privilege of being in these type of roles where I'm either leading teams or helping teams or building tools that other people use to build the software that runs the business. So to me, that's kind of the acceleration story of if you're building the tools that people are using, then you have both a responsibility and accountability for, obviously security and productivity, but also the acceleration. If the tool itself and the developer product that you're using is not making you move faster, right, then you're moving backwards. You're not moving forward.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, right? There's so many AI tools, right? And
that's right.
There's days where I feel like it's one-shotting something in 5 minutes that saved me a week, and then there's other days where I feel like I'm chasing around a hyper-intelligent child for hour after hour. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, thank you. Yeah. And I interrupted you though. Where did you get what you wanted to say, or?
No, just to kind of the journey for me has been. Coincidental, if you will. I remember my very first contribution to open source tools and projects was out of necessity, out of need of we needed to use something internally and was limited in some ways, and I felt okay, it's open source, maybe I can just contribute to it, and I did, and I got that PR accepted. And then I got hooked into it. I'm I can go and do this for a whole bunch of things that I can make better. And then turned out internally of okay, how I can take these tooling and make developer experiences that are useful for my team. And then I realized I can do this at scale by working at companies who are building tools for developers like Kong and NPM and Socket.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. So we've kind of hinted at it a little bit already, but and you and I talked about this the other night. For me, I'm working in sort of an enterprise right now, and they're literally squirreled away in rooms talking about which one are we going to say yes to, and trying to get the not just the SOW but the right privacy setup with their AI vendor of choice, because their dev teams they know they want to be using it, but they're feeling squeamish around but we're about to check all of our code into your system essentially, or run agents that have access to everything on the laptops, including our code. So yeah, they want to be careful about that. But for me, in my own practice, I'm using stuff like Claude Code and stuff like GitHub Copilot, and as I hinted at, some days it's a big win, and other days I wonder. But what about you? When you think about your personal use, what kinds of tools are you using right now? What kind of approaches are you using right now? What's working?
Yeah, so obviously personal use versus a team collaborative view versus an enterprise ready type of usage is different.
Of course.
For me, I kind of actually went down the path of, I have my own server at home with 4 NVIDIA GPUs in it and wanted to run everything locally, and obviously ran into so many challenges and problems to try to scale that. But I have that kind of setup that helps me with experimenting with understanding how the AI does its magic, if you will.
Yep.
Compared to, for example, using Claude Code or using the open LLMs and those type of tools that are out there. It gave me a lot of learning of understanding how does that work on a hardware level. Mm-hmm. Not to say that I'm an expert in that regard, but knowing how that works also helps me better kind of tailor my prompting for something like Cursor or something like Claude Code or so on. Helps me kind of set the the scope of what the LLM has access to, so that it can be optimized for a better outcome. Again, in a sort of experimentation phase. But the interesting thing is those technologies are moving at such a rapid pace that any kind of early learnings that I did and optimization I did are almost irrelevant now, because of things like the context window is now so big, so you can just dump your whole code base at it and it will figure it out.
Right.
For me, what I'm using on a daily basis now, I use a Claude Code with some custom MD configurations and rules and especially with the new kind of agents that
multi-agent
stuff now that helps kind of like stream that better. I still use Cursor for a lot of things, but I found myself, maybe because like, again, I'm a old school developer in that sense, as opposed to somebody new into the space. I still want to do the coding part. I still want to write the code. I still want to modify things the way I want to modify them. But I'm still finding a lot of acceleration of value in, rather than asking the AI to one-shot something and, hey, build this feature for me, or update this page to do this. I might be the one to do like the initial implementation, especially in a context of a refactor. For example.
Interesting. Okay.
So I would do the refactor of some function or some method or some way of doing things. And the nice thing about like, especially the IDE tools, more so the CLI tools, it knows what you just changed.
Right.
So as you go from file to file, it has that context, and the autocomplete kind of kicks in. And it's like, oh, I saw that you changed the way you did that function, and now you're on this other file and it has a very similar function. So I'm assuming you want that change. So all of a sudden I find myself just pressing tab, 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 and it's just doing all the same thing that I wanted to do.
And its tab completions are smarter and multi-line and understands a lot more. Versus just sort of tab completion for like name of the method. Like it's a lot more now.
That's right.
Got it. Okay, cool. I've heard good stuff about Cursor. I was talking to some friends the other night, and like one was like a big Cursor devotee, and the other one was like tried 3 or 4 things, but it still seems to be like one of the ones that people talk about. Interesting.
I still use VS Code as my main IDE. When I'm writing the code, and I want to do that kind of example of like I'm refactoring something and I'm gonna go through a bunch of files and make a bunch of random changes. I would go to Cursor and do it in Cursor instead, because of that. Alt tab and tab completion and knowing the file context, it's faster at that. If I'm one-shotting something, or I want to do a big feature or a new kind of method in an API or something, I go back to Cloud Code in the CLI and let it do it, and then I go into VS Code and do my own edits. And take it from there. So it's multi-tooling. Nothing's really magical yet in terms of it can do everything. I haven't gotten to use a lot of I haven't gotten to rely a lot on like the GitHub PR agent type examples, like whether it's GitHub Copilot or even the Cursor one. I find those a bit more noisy. And you don't get to carry the context of what you're doing to them. So if you open a PR and let Copilot or Claude's agent try to comment on the PR or review it, it just ends up being noisy. I end up ignoring it for the most part.
It's unfair since I'm only using it like on a personal project. Like, but to me, that is the interesting part, is like how it's going to shape teams, right? Like, I think of you and I as both like modern software practitioners, and do you want to call that agile engineering or whatever? Like, I mean, like as an industry, we've built up a lot of practices over the last 20 years, like user stories and unit tests. These are some good basics in the end. And some people push you down like, oh, look, you have to have TDD, and you mock this or that or the other thing. And there's just continuous integration, obviously, continuous delivery. And I think that stuff probably stays. But I think some of these things we're questioning now. So when you think about like the interactions you've had in teams with this stuff, like what are you seeing there? Are you seeing teams change the way they think about staffing? Are they changing the way they think about process? Like what? Yeah, I mean, think about the higher level. I'd love to hear what you're seeing there.
So I have 2 minds on this. I have the mindset of how does this change the software development industry as a whole, especially from like the context of staffing and roles and responsibilities and team structures and dynamics. I think it's going to be a major shift, and it's already been happening. You see a lot of companies go through either layoffs or restructuring. Some of them are blaming the AI, but it's not really about the AI. It's economical reasons that they're doing it. But there is an actual, real, tangible measure of difference of what you're seeing with teams who are using AI in certain ways that helps them kind of accelerate or add value. Which means, again, from a team structure and job perspectives, there's going to be massive shifts in that too. So there's going to be perhaps less need for a QA person if you're just relying on the AI to do a bunch of QA. It doesn't have to be good QA, but you can do it 1,000 times faster and way more numerous kind of runs at it than a human being can do it. Same thing with things like design changes or UI changes. There's enough structure in there for the machine to know what it needs to do, and for the AI to kind of make that work change for you. It still doesn't scale to the degree of like human thinking and strategic thinking about bigger picture stuff. But that's where I see like a lot of that shift. And I think the question that a lot of people are asking, is this going to take jobs away?
Yeah, for sure.
I think the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
But not for the reasons everybody's talking about. Like if you look at the TikToks and the hype cycle of AI and what people talk about it, it's not about so much about having a machine that's so smart that can do the job of a human. It's about the economical incentives of companies.
Right.
When they look at it and they say, okay, well, I can either have, let's use the QA example because that's a simple one. I can either have 2 or 3 full-time people who are doing QA. They can only work 9 to 5. They can only produce so much.
Right.
Or I can just throw a couple $100 a month on an AI agent that will just work 24/7 and just keep on churning things.
Yep.
And it's only getting cheaper at this point.
Yep.
Granted, it's subsidized heavily, but it's cheap. So it's less about the machines getting smarter and replacing our capabilities, more about the economical incentives for businesses to operate at a lower cost.
But to your point, I think to your point, definitely it's my experience anyway, you still need a human in the loop. Right. So how you can't actually go 24/7. Right. We kind of talk about 9 to 5 as though like, oh, yeah, but the machines never sleep. Well, yeah, that doesn't matter. Like you still need somebody to supervise it. Yeah,
but that's a cascading impact as well. Like, do we need a 10+ year experienced engineer who's going to look at everything and their salary is going to be super high?
Right.
Versus there's enough context being generated by these AI agents that somebody who's new to the industry can take a lower salary and do that at part-time work.
Yep.
Right. So I'm not saying that's the current pattern, but you can see where this is heading.
Yep.
Even then, take it out the context of engineering skill set and talent. If the AI agent is generating a lot of the work and the functionality, and you need to do human in the loop kind of a validation of that, maybe the product manager can do that.
Right.
Maybe the customer can do that.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's other ways to distribute your cost.
Yeah.
And therefore,
customer. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Distribute your costs and then operate at a more leaner state.
Yeah.
But again, that also means the cascading impact further is what is everybody going to be doing in their careers, and then the access to jobs becomes more limited, which means it gets more competitive, which means potentially lower salaries. Which this whole industry has been built on this whole promise.
Oh man,
of everybody needs to learn how to code, and this is
the air is
your
being
golden
let out
ticket,
of the bubble for sure. Yeah.
And I was actually listening. I think it was the New York Times podcast the other day. They were talking about all these tech executives in the past 10 years have been singing the song of everybody needs to be a developer. Everybody needs to code.
I caught that one. Yeah.
And like now,
but did it work? Right.
It didn't work.
Everyone went and learned to code.
And you have all these people now who went to the universities and just graduating, and they can't find jobs.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And that's a big challenge. And it's funny, you're talking about like how we'll interact with it. And I didn't even think about customer. I love that. But you mentioned sort of product versus, this and that. Sometimes I feel like when I'm using it, I'm in one of two modes, and one mode might be sort of almost like a product owner, right? I kind of like sitting down with the agent interface and like thinking thoroughly about like, oh, this is what I want to do. And I have to explain to this set of neural networks what it is that I want to do, right? I like that because it forces me to think about what I'm going to do, right? And so that is nice. But I almost feel much more like a product owner at that stage than I do as a software developer or architect or anything like that. So that's one mode. This other mode is almost more like disciplinarian. They talked about in the 90s and in the 2000s, like, oh, maybe architects will tell junior developers exactly what functions to write, and that didn't work at all. But I kind of feel like I'm that person now. Like, I'm not literally telling Claude, this is the function I want you to write, but I am sort of very much supervising its work. And sometimes it's fine, and sometimes it's like, nope, that's not how that works. Please rewind. And it literally, the 1, 2, 3, like 3 is always like, stop and tell me what to do differently. It's like, yeah, I'm hitting 3 right now. And so that's kind of these two kind of modes. You also mentioned QA. I feel like I can't let its work online. I have to have a human looking at it, right? And that's sort of the other mode that I'm often in, is just testing the work that it just did and seeing if like it's actually good enough to go, right? So I don't know. I don't know how that's resonating with your experience.
I'm two minds of these things, and putting on my 20+ years of development experience hat on, I agree with you. It's like, there's clear limitations.
Yeah.
It's never going to be as good. And there's specific kind of experience that I would bring in and you would bring in
Yeah.
that we can lean on and, either direct it in a particular way or limit what we want it to produce so that it works the way we want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of that coin, though, is why does that matter?
Right.
If you think about it in an abstract notion, the things you're pointing out and things you're highlighting, which I agree with, we're doing these things because we're making these decisions based on human interactions with machines.
Yep.
In fact, programming languages, frameworks, developer tools, they are built for humans to interact with the bits and bytes.
Yep.
Right? So even at let's take a language level. At a language level, the reason languages are designed in a certain way is for a human to read them.
That's right.
And for a human to interact with them.
Yep.
And everything to do with that is about whether it's the debugging, the data structures, the formats, the workflows, everything is for the human eye.
Yep.
And we're trying to fit this AI workflows and these AI agents into a human process.
Yep.
So when we're thinking about it as you're describing, it's you want to have PRDs and specs and steps and workflows and, agile and waterfall and all these topics that come into play when we're talking about a human interacting with machines.
Yep.
But perhaps we need to look at it separately or differently because these are not humans, nor should they be acting like humans. I mean, who knows if they eventually get that level of self-awareness and intelligence. That's a different story. But you see it today even with, I think GitHub released a thing called Spec Kit.
Okay.
And the whole point of a spec kit is literally to repeat what we do as humans, which is write a PRD and write the breakdown of the stories and write down the task. It's a good mechanism to help the kind of AI go through what we expect it to do.
Yep.
But maybe the answer is different. Maybe the answer is it doesn't matter. Maybe the answer is we need to look at those tooling and the way they do the outcome, because we're looking at the output, not the outcome.
I hear you.
Right?
So to your point, we like to talk about C++ is based on C and Objective-C was also based on C and C# was, but in a way they're all based on English.
Correct.
Right? There's not a lot of programming language that start with Hindi. Maybe they should, right? But point being, it is English because it is the developer experience. We like to talk about, programming languages that, these are the languages that computers understand. That's not true at all. The compiler makes a thing that the computer understands. These programming languages are meant for us.
Correct.
So to your point, I guess where you're going is productivity will be higher. If we shift the way that we're thinking about tooling from a developer experience as a human to a developer experience as an agent.
Potentially. I think the holy grail for this is bypass the programming language altogether. And if there's an automation where I can ask the machine to do something for me and it does it as low level as you go, like maybe assembly or maybe even further than that, maybe at the CPU level, CPU instruction sets, right? Because that's ultimately what we're compiling down to. You're compiling from something like Node to C to some assembly to some instruction set that's actually running, electrons in CPU pathways.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
If the more you shortcut that, and the reason those abstractions exist is because the human interaction point.
Yeah. We have, as a species, we don't have a great track record of actually getting rid of anything old.
That's right.
The Linux kernel recently made news for removing, Ethernet drivers from the 2000s or something. I don't remember what it was. The POSIX environment is still inside of Linux. We don't need POSIX anymore, right? So to your point, I wonder how deep we'll go in terms of getting rid of all the programming languages or not. But I hear you.
The other part of that is if you think of the larger consumer of these tools, if you look at tools like Lovable and Replit and these platforms, they're still somewhat, some of them are starting to move away from that, but they're still kind of the first thing you see is the code editor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you're starting to see others where you don't even see the code editor anymore. And the average person can go in and say, hey, build me an app that does X, Y, and Z. And they don't want to see the code.
Yeah.
And they don't want to know what the functions are. And as long as it works, that's all they care about.
I'm with you. Yeah. It's almost a democratization. And I do think that's an important aspect. I want to interview somebody I was talking to the other day that he was a toy inventor and now he's, using this stuff because he can, I do think that's an interesting part of it. But I don't know. I do want to steer the conversation back to what does a tech team do today? I feel like you've been kind of saying that whatever we do today, it might be different in 6 months.
Yep.
You're probably right. Yet, and yet, what do we do today, right? I mean, are we hiring fewer software developers? Is QA not needed anymore, or does it get changed? Like, if let's imagine a pause button, not that there will be one, but let's imagine there were, and if you were staffing a team today based on this stuff, what would you do?
I like the nuance in trying to answer that question because it also depends on, well, who are you? Are you an enterprise, large business? Are you a small startup trying to build a product and go to market? Are you a tech business, or are you a tech adjacent type of product business? These are all important variables in that context. So just to maybe work backwards from that, like if your main product is not technology, but you need technology, whatever. Even if you're doing fast food, you still need some sort of technology involved, right? Your product is not the technology, but you're selling maybe food or selling furniture.
Yep.
I would see those type of organizations leaning more towards the low-hanging fruits. The more there's automation and tooling and AI can help democratize that and make it easier, the more likely these organizations are going to have less need for development and potentially even smaller teams that have to maintain these things. Versus if your product is technology, then you probably have higher level of requirements, security, privacy, scalability. You want to optimize for cost and speed versus optimize for the outcome.
Plus, you need more control. You need more impact over the outcome. Right. You can't use whatever's in the box on some level. Now, and AI changes what's in the box, clearly, right? It's a bigger box now. But if you're trying to compete with it or compete, on a level playing field with it, then you need to be able to do more. To your point,
and the quality of the software that's being generated may not matter in different contexts, right?
Okay, so let's say it's an enterprise team, right? Let's say this enterprise team is it's a business, and to your point, it's not necessarily going to compete with OpenAI tomorrow. And so let's say they've sort of got their e-commerce face, which is like ringing in the cash register. And currently, let's say they're investing pretty well. Let's say they've got 4 or 5 different teams in charge of e-commerce. Like, think about how e-commerce works. You end up with like the product details page, and you end up with product categories and your cart. And oh my God, cart is really important in order, and shipping and all this kinds of stuff. I'm thinking back to our TELUS Digital days almost. But then you have this other team, which is like sort of dealing with like the low-level integrations, right? Like let's say it's a store, and so you got to pull point-of-sale data in from the stores, and you got to pull all the data together to see what's actually selling and how much sold with the mobile app versus how much sold in the stores. What do they do today? Like let's say it's like 5-6 teams in like digital, and let's say it's 2 or 3 teams on sort of like back end. Yeah. What do you coach them for? Like, let's say you land and you're consultant number 1, and let's say, where do we start?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is what are the metrics they're trying to optimize for.
Yeah.
So if you're, let's use that example. Let's say you're looking at the e-commerce and the cart, and we know this already. Like one of the biggest metrics is time to check out, processing time, finding results, converting a customer.
Yep.
Those type of things. You're not likely going to get that level of acceleration from unleashing an AI agent at the code and letting it make it better. You need that human effort of here's how we optimize a system at scale, knowing what the level of operations we run at. What happens today also looks different than what happens on Black Friday and so on.
That's right.
Those are the kind of strategic planning that the human still needs to drive, and the experience kind of architecture view of the software and how it can build to scale is definitely important. Versus like the back office stuff, for example, analytics and reporting and knowing what's in the data and what's happening. The metric there is informational. It's not operational. So knowing that I can track the information that's coming through the cards into my data lake or to my business process or my BI dashboards is important because it drives business decisions in the company. But does that need to be the most experienced software teams leading that work?
Right.
And we've seen that trend already with like BI products and BI tools, and a lot of analytics over the years have shifted from core engineering to the average kind of user being able to go and query their own data.
Yep.
So there's an acceleration in that too. From
think about how like Snowflake sells more to the marketing department than it does to the technology department.
That's right. And now that marketing department doesn't need to have like marketing ops people. They can have AI agents answering the person who's never written a SQL query in their entire life.
Got it.
They can ask the question and get the answer.
Yep.
So different areas require different kind of incentives that drive the decisions.
Okay, so let's focus on that e-commerce team, and let's say we're really trying to make cart just really great. So we can't like hand it over to the AI somehow. Are you using it?
I think the usage ends up being in multiple areas. So what I've seen teams do today, whether they're more restricted, like enterprise context, or like more open-minded and able to experiment with things like startups and smaller teams, there's a lot of UI, front end, mobile.
Yeah.
That seems like a low-hanging fruit that a lot of people are more than happy to throw the AI at it, especially in like making changes as opposed to building something from scratch or building new.
Right.
So it's like, hey, customer feedback said this page doesn't work on mobile, or this information is not legible. We want to make it more clear, and the UX of the experience needs to be different. There's a lot of that happening in the UI front, and teams are using that to a certain effectiveness and lower cost and faster kind of output. We see things in, like I mentioned earlier, QA. Throw QA at it and let it QA the PR that you made 24/7 until find something that's broken and run it through. You see products like CodeRabbit and other things that do PR reviews and look at things like security and compliance and, hey, there may be a SQL injection here, or maybe it's something that breaks other services and that you haven't considered when you made this API change.
Yep.
It helps augment what you may not have thought about, because again, our human limitation is you're given a task or a story in Jira or a thing to deliver on, and you put kind of your focus mode on and try to deliver that task. But in a large enterprise, that system you're touching is probably integrated with 50 to 100 other systems.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And this is where we had like contract testing and all these other kind of like standards that take time and effort and cognitive load to load into our brains and try to deal with it as we make changes. But hey, AI can help accelerate that a bit.
No doubt. You mentioned Jira, and you've talked a little bit about like spec building and that kind of thing. What have you seen out there? Like, I've heard some people talk about like, oh, BAs now, I guess there's like a spec kit. Well, maybe it was spec kit. Maybe it's what you're thinking about, but some sort of tool for more like product managers for like automatically making PRDs based on a conversation or something. And so like that would be sort of the tool for that role. But then I'm wondering, like, at some level, like, does product end up talking to the AI and developers talk to it in a different way? Or do you still have a tool like Jira in the middle, right? Or are you... There was a time when like a finely crafted user story was a really important thing. You had BAs on your team that this was like their main skill set, as I can write great stories. And a software developer can look at that story and tell, small, medium, or large, because the clarity was there. And I mean, that's kind of fading with some of the shift to the way product has changed things. Do we see that change even more, right? Like in terms of who's writing the specs and how does that work? And like as a software developer, what am I picking up the top item in the to-do list in Jira still? Or what does that item look like, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I think this is where like some of those more advanced agentic workflows are becoming interesting. I don't think they're there fully yet. But like take the BA example and crafting a user story or crafting a spec. We're seeing, for example, AI agents sit on meetings and recording meetings and summarizing those meetings.
Yeah.
Where we can have AI agents go into our kind of wiki and documentation and index everything and know everything there is to know about them.
Yep.
Those same AI agents can also look at all the customer tickets and the histories and the bugs and so on. So I haven't seen this type of product yet, but I would say it's low-hanging fruit and easily feasible, where either it's a human-generated kind of spec or initialization of a spec, but then augment that with what you know about the customer, what we know about the meetings that were had, what you know about what's already in the docs, and what you already know in the code.
Yeah.
So I can see those type of workflows where AI agents can come in and either enrich what was written, or help you create that first draft and then get that human approval in. You still need that human approval in that context.
Sort of making some pull this in, like, do you have a dependency on that? Like this looks like this was the area of the code that so-and-so worked on recently. Right. Do you want to get their input? Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay. So again, not necessarily, this is more of an augment than replace strategy. Yeah, but I could definitely see that working. Cool. Okay.
Yeah. You still want to add to inject a human decision, because like you can point the AI agent at all your customer tickets and the history of issues and all the documentation, but The AI agent doesn't know that your documentation has been updated in 3 months.
Right.
It doesn't know that those customers have churned and their input is not really what's driving the next product strategy.
Right.
It's going to miss a lot of these things that are still locked in our brains.
Right.
So until there's chips in our brains that can translate that to the AI
Immediately.
right? There's no kind of magical solution there. But again, the enrichment is valuable. Enrichment can happen at like a faster speed than a human trying to do it.
Yeah.
And again, much cheaper.
What's coming to mind is the signal to noise ratio needs to be really good. Like if it brings me 5 things a day and none of them are ever worth looking into, I'm going to stop looking at it on some level. Yeah.
That's my example of when we were talking earlier about like the agents doing PR comments.
Yeah.
It's just noise.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's some valuable things in there, but for the most part, I stopped looking at them.
Yeah.
Because there's so much noise, and everybody talks about reinforcement learning in the context of all these tools. They will take your feedback and learn it, and then do better next time. But if I'm not looking at it enough, I'm not actually going to bother to sit down and write the feedback to, let's say in the PR context, like, hey, Claude, no, that thing is irrelevant, or here's why.
Yep.
I'm not going to do that. That's more of my time to do it.
Yep.
So I think there needs to be a better way of that reinforcement learning that can happen organically.
Yeah.
That doesn't require even more work for us to do.
What I'm looking forward to doing on reinforcement learning, I don't know how many times I've fired I won't name names at this stage because I'm speaking critically, but I don't know how many times I've fired my favorite coding agent because like it did something that I told it not to do 100 times in a row, and put in all of the MD files that I could possibly find. And I'm sure I did it wrong, but like every time like it goes and updates my database for me, again, after me telling it never to do that, like it's like, nope, you're fired. And I sort of like push it back, relegated to some sort of junior software developer role for like 3 weeks or something until I get lazy and let it try something again. Yeah.
Yeah. Devil's advocate. Again, we do that because we have the experience and we know what's good and what's not. But if you think about the next generation of people who are not developers, does that even matter to them? As long as the outcome is correct.
Well, and this kind of gets into like AI slop, right? Like slop creating slop. I don't want to say like, oh, no junior developer is ever capable. I've known some great junior developers, but they're not going to know everything they need to know to spot all of the things. Okay, very typical old man thing to say, of course, on my part. But still, I mean, like, how are we going to get the experience if we're letting these sets of neural networks like go and create all of the code from now on? We're not going to get the reps, to do the learning. We're going to get reps of something different, I guess. Repetition of managing the AIs is what the reps we're going to get now.
I think that's the thing that scares me the most. Whether not to look at it as a doomsday kind of like cyberpunk future context.
You can go there,
if we stop learning and if we stop relying on it, eventually we're all going to die off. To get dark about it, right?
Yep.
And if we're not doing the junior to senior kind of like learn by example and learn by pairing with people who've done it before, and everybody's using AI now to generate code, and nobody's even alt tabbing to the source code part to even look at it anymore.
That's right.
Does human learning and innovation in tech just pauses? Now, again, that's a bit of a, exaggeration of what might the end result be, because the AI companies are still tech and building tech and looking at things, behind the scenes. But imagine that scenario for a second, where nobody's looking at the code anymore. The AI is doing everything. What are you learning? You're learning, to your point, you're learning how to make better prompts. You're learning how to make better things. And so on and so forth. Again, glass half full kind of view on that. Okay, isn't that the same as languages and abstractions and frameworks? Like, how many of us actually know how the internals of C work? Versus the framework that we learned how to use and the abstractions on top of that.
Well, and that's sort of another question I've got for you. And I found myself the other day firing a JavaScript framework because Claude sucked at it. And it was like, really, I'm sorry. I really like this JavaScript framework, but no. And I literally asked the agent, like, what would be better? I know Python and I know JavaScript in a general way. What do you know really well? And it came back and gave me a list, and that's how we chose our frameworks. But is that a pattern elsewhere, or is that just something that, like, are we all doing that and not talking about it?
That's definitely a pattern. I mean, how many CPU instruction sets exist? 2.
Yep.
That's it. There are others, but nobody uses them.
Yep.
Right? How many, if you think about it at like, whether it's, if you go all the way down, obviously, to instruction sets, that's like the most I guess that's the most low-level one. But even beyond that, like, do you and I know how to build a CPU? No.
No, good Lord, no.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's literally on one hand, you can count how many companies in the world who do that.
Yeah.
And we all rely on that abstraction.
ASML, Samsung,
That's right.
you know, TSMC.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then there's more abstractions on top of that and more abstractions on top of that. And we're all relying on these levels of abstractions. So at some point, maybe, I don't know how fast that will come, but there will be just the one universal way of building frameworks.
Yeah.
That's the one that the AI is best at. And that's what everybody's going to default to.
Yeah.
And that's end of story.
Yeah. Yep. I worry about that killing creativity, but it'll probably encourage a different kind of creativity, I guess.
Exactly. Then you get creative on the higher abstraction layer that now we're operating at, which is like the human language and the prompting and everything else.
Yeah. I remember hearing a story about, you know, a really old school C software developer who was first hearing about, like, I don't know, going from subroutines to functions, right? Or functions to objects or something. I don't remember what the jump was, but something, you know, that we would now take for granted. And their thought at the time was, well, yeah, but if I start using these higher levels of abstraction, how am I going to do like the timing work with a CPU that I do today? Like keep managing exactly what's in the registers. You're not going to do that with a managed language, right? You're not going to do that in object-oriented, you know, for the most part. But that turned out not to be important. Like, I mean, on some level, CPUs got faster and faster, so who cares? You know, it was kind of fine. Like, there's not that many times where you needed to be able to tune what's in the registers. Yeah.
We've seen that already with the cloudification of everything, right? Like, how many of us actually care about, you know, file storage management anymore?
Right.
Storage is cheap. That's kind of the whole thing with the cloud.
Yep.
Just throw whatever you want to throw in the cloud, and you're not paying the cost of it. So therefore, you don't have people who specialize in that skill anymore and spending a lot of their time doing it.
Yep.
Same thing with databases. Same thing with like API interfaces and everything else.
Yep.
I used to have that hard line like many years ago. I actually wrote a blog post about this. It was a bit of a rant. I was interviewing a lot of people. It was like for a front end development role, and everybody I was interviewing would ask them questions about JavaScript, and they just knew how to use jQuery.
Oh,
they didn't know how to use JavaScript. They just know how to use jQuery. They didn't realize that for themselves. And I was kind of being a hardliner of like, no, I need somebody who actually knows the fundamentals.
Yep.
And I remember I wrote that blog post, and it went on Slashdot at the time.
Nice.
And then a lot of people kind of had opinions. Let's put it that way. But like fast forward many years now, I'm looking back at that. I'm like, that was a foolhardy effort because ultimately it didn't matter. I don't even use native JavaScript as much anymore. I'm using frameworks and tools and so on and abstractions.
Yep.
So there's value in that for the human learning part for sure. But from a productivity sense, in a team context, in a business context, those become slowly less and less important. As long as the productivity and the outcome is what the business is driving, that's what the job is about.
I'm with you. I think there's still something to the software developer who's only used one language and they've used it for 20 years. That's a bad sign, or even 10 years and never learned anything else. But to your point, like whether they know TypeScript or JavaScript or whatever, they can probably learn as long as they've also learned Java or also learned something else. Okay. So frameworks and languages, you're seeing similar things. Has it changed anything about the way you mentor? Has it changed anything about the way you coach, manage?
Yeah, I think the number one thing I go to now is, well, you know, the traditional don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions and we can work on it together type of mindset. It's now more of the, well, did you try your hardest with the AI to find the answers? And then I can help you make that more efficient rather than let's talk about why this didn't work and get down to the level of detail, because that's time spent, right? In a business context, you're spending your time doing that, whether, you know, you're coaching a junior team member or you're coaching a peer or whatever you're doing, or even like somebody else. Time is our most valuable commodity, right? As human beings. So if you're not leveraging these tools to their maximal value, even if you don't know how to use them, even if you're not, you know, the best prompt engineer there is, or you know how to use the context, it does help bridge a gap. And like your example already, you ask the tool, what's the framework I should use? I gave you. There's enough there to level you up and give you like an acceleration of value. And then like further than that, we can then get into the more technical things that again, the human context and experience can add to it. So I'm seeing that a lot nowadays, especially with like junior and or people who are still, you know, new to it and still kind of stuck in their old way.
Right.
It's the first thing is like, well, have you tried? Have you gotten the relied on the agent a little bit, give it a little bit of a trust.
Yeah.
And
It's a certain kind of senior developer I'm worried about more, frankly. Yeah.
Yeah, the senior developer is a bit more, I would say, I've had a couple of those examples where somebody is a bit more defensive. Like, well, it's never going to be as fast as me.
Yep.
Sure, I agree. I still find myself coding things faster than prompting an agent to do it and then giving it the feedback and trying back and forth. But then I give them those examples of like, yeah, I've coded up myself, but now when I'm going from one file to the other, making changes, the autocomplete is actually faster.
Yeah.
Give them an example of, work on something and then let it go overnight and do a bunch of QA on it because you want to sleep.
Yep. Right.
There's those areas that can help break the guard down a bit.
Yep.
We're not going to talk about this replacing you, or you're always going to be smarter than the machine, or so on. That's fine. That's a debate we're going to have for a long time, I'm guessing, as a society. But you need to highlight the aspects where there's tangible, irrefutable value that people can actually benefit for, and then it feeds into their own kind of mindset of, well, I'm good at this. Why would I offload it to something else? Great. So find the places where you can still be at the good things that you're doing, and let it do the other boring stuff. Do it the small tasks that take you time, or do the things that are boring to you or not important to you, but buy you more time to do the things that you are better at.
Yep. When I'm ever like sitting down and doing like a session of coding, and not just sort of in between meetings, but if I'm sitting down for like 3 hours working with AI coding tools, I realized at some point that like right before I took a coffee break, I would sort of get to like, all right, let's sort of finish this thought, and then get to, okay, what I want you to do now is go look for any missing unit tests, and then go write them, and then go run them, and then fix them if they're broken. And I hope it's going for 20 minutes while I'm getting a coffee. Maybe it only takes 2. I don't know.
One of my favorite things that I always do now, even if I wrote the whole code myself and I know it works and there's nothing to add to it, I just ask the agents like, hey, what other ways can this be done in?
Yeah.
Whether it's at a functional level or like a function level or like a whole system level.
Yeah.
And it's a great way for research and learning. Because, I mean, as you remember, we all used to have to Google for things and search for things. And that used to be a skill in itself.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's one thing to try to search for your question and find the one answer. It's another thing to try to find, well, how do other people do this? Or how are other mechanisms that I didn't know about? Whether, again, it's at a language level or a system design level, or keeping up with like technology changes, right? It's a skill. And it's time consuming. Well, now I just go and ask it, okay, I've written all this code, or something generated this code. Great. What other ways can this be actually achieved?
Yeah.
Again, at a system level or a functional level, I'm actually learning stuff. I learned that like, oh, there's a new API that does this. Oh, there's a new function that does that. Or, oh, I didn't realize I can do it this way. I'm learning things, and I love it. That's new to me. Like it's rare that I've been able to do that unless it's something brand new that I've never done before.
Yeah.
But even like with the same context of the language or the framework or the system that I'm designing, I'm finding new things I didn't even know existed.
That's awesome. Awesome. Cool. It's funny, but when you bring that up, like the 2 thoughts come to my mind, and one is this memory of like literally I needed to learn a lot about a certain chemistry, a certain technology, a certain approach. And so I did. I sat down and said like, hey, I think this is how this works. What have I got wrong? And it would tell me, you're close, but, and it did a pretty good job of like teaching me what I needed to know about that subject. It was actually really great. So I like where you're going. There are other times where it tried to tell me that like, this is how you do that in that library. And then I would say, all right, fine. And try it. And it doesn't work. And it'll be like, oh, that was going to be released, but they decided not to release that feature. It's like, what? You just hallucinated that. So we obviously still have to be careful with these things there. But
I think contextually different things like, I think generally speaking, those type of hallucinations are happening less in the context of code.
Yeah.
Because those LLM providers have really tuned those things very well. And
MCPs allow like more better documentation.
And exactly. And that was going to be my other things. Like, you have tooling now, you have lookups.
Yeah.
Those things can actually browse the net and find information.
Yep.
So that type of hallucination is happening less.
That's true. And that's my only story, to your point. Yeah. That is my only story of that happening. Yeah. That's the only time in like the 6 months I've been using it. So, okay.
But outside of code, there's definitely a lot of hallucinations happening. Yeah. Like, I've done a lot of like video and image processing with AI and so on. Like there's still a lot of hallucinations in that regard. And there's no answer for things like MCP or tooling in that regard. In fact, the only answer in the industry is you just do more LLMs. You have kind of like a multi-agent system where, like in the context of a video kind of analysis, you would scan the video and then have another agent validate the outputs of the first agent. And then you have a third one kind of do another run at the video and validate. It's kind of turtles all the way down type of scenario.
Right.
So for that one, not very optimistic yet. But yeah, I think in the code context, it's much better.
Yeah, agree. How many? Also, where do you stop with the turtles? Like, so to your point, you're referring to this story. Yeah. This is where you were working a bit ago. Media startup.
Yep.
Yeah, and so you were getting the AIs to review video, I guess. So this is like user-generated content.
It's like social media content, user-generated content. I'm looking for specific markers of things that are like safety-related topics,
right.
or people posting things they shouldn't online, and kind of looking at those type of things. And I think the biggest factor of change there was like the bigger context window sizes, because there was so much effort to like slice and dice the video so it can fit the context window, and then you have to do a lot of post-processing to because take for example, if you have a video of like 60 minutes long or this kind of interview, right, and you want to put it through AI from, let's say, for 2 to 3 years ago, you can't just do one shot in that. So you have to slice the video up and then do batches, and then for every batch you would ask the AI for something like, hey, was there bad words or insecure things or bad things that are happening in this video, but then you have to like post-process all of that because the context matter. What happened in the first 10 minutes might be relevant to what's happening in the last 20 minutes. And if you're doing this in segments and in isolation, that wasn't very good because you get a lot of false positives. Okay. So you have to give it the bigger context and then do a lot of post-processing to do that. And then all of a sudden Google came up with like 1 million token context window size. A lot of that went away. Because now the AI itself knows that, what was said at minute 25 was in context of something else, so you're not going to take it out of context, and therefore it's okay, it's not a bad thing. They didn't say a bad word or didn't do something bad because it was in the context of a discussion. That,
they were just referring to that other joke from before or
exactly,
whatever.
Whatever the context might be. I don't want to give too many detailed examples there. Graphical content and so on. But like that helps, right? That made it so much better. But then, again, there's still a lot of hallucinations. There's still a lot of false positives.
Interesting.
The interesting thing, though, is like companies like Google, companies like Microsoft, obviously doing a lot of machine learning and AI. They're going to be so far ahead from anybody else trying to do this because they have the data. Like Google has the web data. They have YouTube. So obviously their models and their solutions for these type of things are going to be much better than others. Right? GitHub has access to all open source code.
All of the code.
So therefore, they're going to maybe they're not the best right now, but they're going to get better at the source code stuff. So I think we're going to start to see a world where there's the marquee companies that have the LLMs that are best tuned and trained for specific things, as well as general stuff, and you get the benefit of using the best of class and everything.
I like that you're going broad, but I want to pull you back into more of a focused area, one more time. And this is another experience. I almost don't know what to call this experience, but I think of it as the inventory problem, right? If you think back to Elias Goldratt and the goal and theory of constraints, and then of course Gene Kim and Phoenix Project was sort of a similar kind of take on this. Some of the idea is that in manufacturing and in software development, the more inventory you have, if you're just building up all this inventory as a manufacturer, what's the point? You want to be selling it. You don't want to be building it up. And so sometimes I think about that from a code perspective. I feel I spent 45 minutes with Claude Code yesterday and I made a thing and it's almost ready. And then I spent an hour with Claude Code over the weekend and I did another thing because I had another idea. And that one's no, that one's not done. And so I've sort of got a lot of inventory. It's almost like the more I use this stuff, the less I finish. And so I started to monitor that and I'm forcing myself to focus and get stuff shipped still. But that seems like it's a problem that kind of doesn't go away. In a way, the faster it makes code, the more code you just have laying around, right? So is this just me doing it wrong, or are you seeing this elsewhere as well?
It goes back to what I was just saying now, which is, what's the best of class in the type of thing? All these LLM providers right now are kind of like generalists. Like Claude and OpenAI and Google Gemini and all these things. They're trying to do everything.
Yep.
And I think part of that is the tooling. You know, yes, it's accelerating us and giving us more value of things, but why isn't there a coding specific LLM, for example, that actually helps you to ship?
Yeah.
Right?
Fair.
Because it's not structured in that way. They're doing general learning and mass learning and training these LLMs.
Yeah.
And therefore you're getting the benefit of that, but it's not helping you be more productive if your objective is to ship something.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
and we're seeing a lot of tooling and things. And so now you have to have, do I have to have the tool that helps me like organize my thoughts into a spec, and then a separate tool that helps me organize those specs into code, and then a separate tool that helps me ship that code.
Right.
Right. So there's a cognitive load on us to go and try to
Pushing all this
work.
stuff together,
Right.
patching this to that and integrating that to this.
And your example as well is also like what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling personally is like, okay, I can do more things now, but wait, those things are not helping me get to a finish line.
Right.
Right. And in a team's context, that's dangerous because
Yeah.
you multiply that across multiple people.
Amen.
You
Right.
multiply that across, hey, we are a business and we need to get something over the shipping line
Right.
and actually get to production.
Right.
And when you have too many things happening at once, there's more clashes and there's
Right.
more complications when it does get time to ship.
Yep.
So that's happening for sure. In some ways, in the smaller companies, let's say, that's being mitigated because they're smaller
Right. Yep.
and they, by nature, have less people.
Right.
In the bigger companies, I think they haven't fully adopted those toolings yet.
That's what I'm seeing so far.
So they haven't gotten to that.
Everybody's
problem
talking about it, but not everybody's doing it. Yeah.
yet. Yeah, and it's gonna be a bigger problem for the enterprise because all of a sudden you have
Yeah.
It's not enough to generate some code and ship it. You have to go through release approvals. You have
Yeah.
to go through
Oh,
process
geez.
and legal and compliance and all these other things. And my worry is AI may never work in enterprise the same way we're seeing it in the small scale because what is the answer there? You're going to have the legal team have AI agents who are going to talk to the compliance team's AI agents, who are going to talk to the development team AI agents, who are going to talk to the engineering. Like it's just, and then again, you got to have a human in the loop in each one of those. And the humans are not going to have the full context all the time. And then we're going to start repeating the patterns of, okay, guys, this is not working. We need to have waterfall approach. Or we need to have meetings.
I don't know.
You need to have release meetings and you need to have a release manager, right?
Yeah.
Like those are the patterns the enterprise teams end up having to do over time.
Yep.
Enforce a process because of the complexity of the human-to-human interactions and the multi-touch points.
Yeah.
And those processes are heavy and expensive and costly.
There's probably a dimension there where some of the enterprises that I'm working with are like literally, one team that I'm familiar with literally made a change. They had like a change advisory board where like multiple VPs and directors every Wednesday had to be on the call for an hour and say yes, yes, yes before you could ship anything. And they themselves have recently made an improvement where there are now certain categories of changes which can avoid that process. They still need to go through a process, but they no longer need to be held, and wait for Wednesday kind of thing. So I think some enterprises are heading in a better direction, and I think it will make an impact. I think you're right, though. Like others won't. Others will kind of go the wrong way with this.
Now here's the, I don't know, controversial view. How much of these processes actually matter, and how many people are actually paying attention?
I don't know. Yeah.
I remember like there was one. I'm not going to say who enterprise I was part of. You need to have like a written approval for a release.
Yeah.
Like somebody has to go sign a piece of paper.
Yeah. Wow.
And I guarantee you that person never read what was on the paper.
No,
Just
for
like
sure.
Scribbled it and off you go.
Yep.
So like all these processes
Yeah,
are there for a good reason.
Right. Right.
Or they're there for a reason.
And they may or may not be helping.
They may or may not be helping.
Towards that reason.
But more importantly, are people actually using these processes for actually preventing bad things or doing things the right way?
Yep.
Or it's just that thought experiments of the monkeys on the ladder. It's just like, this is how the way it is, and everybody has to go through this process, and the manager is blindly signing the release forms and saying you're allowed to release now. Or like
You're going to have to tell me about monkeys and ladders at some point. Like, what is this analogy?
I forgot what the thought experiment is, but the idea is that researchers have a bunch of monkeys in a cage or like, in a lab, and they put a ladder in the middle of the cage and they put bananas on top of it. And then every time a monkey tries to get up to get the bananas, they would hose them down with water. hose the other monkeys with water. So the monkey who got out the ladder didn't get punished, but everybody else gets punished. And slowly the monkeys learned that anytime somebody tries to get up to get a banana, everybody gets punished. So now they stopped any monkey from doing that. And then what happened is the researchers would replace all these monkeys with other ones over time, and until they're all new monkeys that have never been splashed with water.
Known. Yeah.
And they've never known the punishment, but nobody ever tries to go up the ladder because it's
they still
learned behavior now.
Yeah, they've carried the culture with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they're not, okay.
I don't know if this is a real experiment. I think it's a thought experiment.
Sure.
But it's a representation of those kind of enterprise kind of processes and workflows and rules that are in place.
Yeah, well, cargo cult is based on history, right? So I can see this being based. Yeah, okay, interesting. So I also want to rewind a bit. Like, to your point, like, I like to think of like Claude Code as like, that's definitely the good one for coding, and true, but you're right, it doesn't help me ship stuff, right? It's not like it's really good at helping me generate code, but not necessarily deploy it, release it, feature flag it, unit test it, So, okay, so to your point, we could see sort of better tooling in there.
And from a human aspect too, like same thing. If you have software developers who are good at writing code, that doesn't mean they're the ones shipping. That's why you need to have the process. That's why you need to have the management structure, the organizational structure to help drive to the end state.
Yeah.
That's why you have the the agile process and everything around that. Because again, the goal is shipping, not just generating code.
Yep. I think that is one of my questions: is how much of agile still makes sense in today's world? And I assume pieces of it do, and pieces of it won't. So, cool.
I think it. If you're thinking of an AI first software development world, whether you want to use agile per se or any sort of specific process that you want to subscribe to, it does help to have a process because again, even if the agent is doing all the work, you want to give it the boundaries, you want to give it the steps, you want to give it how you expect it to do the thing.
Right.
Because again, in an enterprise context, it's more than just writing code and shipping it. There's compliance needs, there's security needs, there's scalability needs. So all of these needs are captured in a process of some sort. And if you use agile as an example, you don't want an agent to go and make whole waterfall type change and then release that. Because that's risky and that's bad. That doesn't change. Those kind of constraints and learnings that we've had as our human process doesn't change when you're fully adopting an AI workflow. They're still applicable. They're still useful. Hopefully less meetings and less kind of bureaucratic kind of process involved, but the lessons of those processes are useful.
Amazing. Cool. Well, we've definitely spent our allotted time. Thank you for coming today. And I also want to thank our sponsors, Navalia. Thank you so much for being our foundational sponsor. And Ahmed, thank you. This was a really great conversation. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.